Hello and welcome to this episode of the Tea in Teaching. This episode is focused on the emergence of AI chatbots and how they relate to higher education. In this episode, I had the chance to interview three leading professors in the field of AI chatbots from Temple University: David Schuff, Jason Thatcher, and Konstantin Bauman. David Schuff is a research professor and the chair of the Department of Management Information Systems. He has published over 50 journal articles and book chapters on various topics like the application of information visualizations to decision support systems and the impact of user-generated content on organizations and society. Jason Thatcher is the Milton F. Stauffer Professor in the Department of Management Information Systems at Fox. Dr. Thatcher studies primarily revolve around individual decision-making, strategic alignment, and workforce issues related to the application of information technologies in organizations. Konstantin Bauman joined Temple University back in 2018 after doing postdoctoral research at New York University. Bauman's research interests are primarily in areas of technical information systems, with a focus on fields of quantitative modeling, data science, and specifically developing novel machine learning methods for predicting customer preferences. Thank you for listening, and please enjoy. All right, let's start first with kind of defining AI chatbots and what they're being used for and how they're being developed. So Konstantin, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I would be happy to start. So chatbot is a computer program designed to simulate conversation with human users. That's like a very broad definition. And there are lots of different applications fall into this definition. So there are multiple different types of chatbots which were developed like a long time ago. So for example, like menu button based chatbot. So you come to the chatbot and it shows you like several buttons. You click on the button and it gives you a response. It shows you another set of buttons. You click on that and it gives you another response. Then it might be like linguistic based or keyboard based chatbots. You type something, chatbot searches for some keywords in your request and then provides you some prepared answer for you. So there might be like hybrid models, and there could be like machine learning chatbots. So I believe we came here today to discuss mostly machine learning chatbots, things that were like developed very recently based on the recent advances in machine learning, on this transformer AI and like generative pre-trained transformer, which was developed by Google and was implemented in ChatGPT. So which actually generates very human-like text. So that's kind of definition, what is the chatbot? Then your question was why they were developed.
Yeah.
So they were obviously developed to communicate to users. So every company can automate certain tasks they do with users. Some support, so if a customer has any issue, they can call and go through this standard set of steps. So instead of having a real person waiting in the call center, you can set a chatbot which will talk to the customer and solve their problems automatically and with no cost.
Yeah, great, thank you. And you're right, they have kind of taken over the headlines. There really seems to be like every day a new development in the way that they're being used. I'm wondering, what are you guys seeing in the recent developments and how they're being used and what they're being used for? Jason, you want to take that one?
Sure. So we're seeing them used more extensively with customer service applications. So where before we'd have a first tier of support where you'd call in the person, your initial person answering supposedly could answer like 90% of your questions.
Sure.
They'd bump you to tier 2, and that would be the more sophisticated expert. Tier 1 has been wiped out for people for the most part.
Okay.
It's now a bot. If they can push you to a computer to have those questions answered somewhat dynamically, and with the modern machine learning chatbots, they can fake being human a lot better, but they're still drawing largely on the same knowledge base. So it's more dynamic. But what it's doing is it's making the experts more valuable. So that's the first place that we're seeing it. We're also starting to see conversations about how to integrate it into the workplace. In more mundane tasks. So you have a chatbot possibly that would sit there and you could say, how does this sound? And you can cut and paste your text into it. And it'll say, that sounds okay for X, Y, or Z. And if you've used a program like Grammarly, that's basically what it's doing. We're seeing programs like DeepL come out, which aren't chatbots, but they're generative machine learning techniques, which are providing similar advice.
Okay.
So you can find that if you want that. The next tier, which people seem to be most afraid of, is that we're going to see chatbots or generative machine learning algorithms used to replace creative acts or more things like programming and whatnot. But really, it still comes back to the question of how you synthesize expertise. And so you may be able to put your question into the bot. It gives you an answer, but you still need a human evaluator.
Yeah.
And so what it serves as in those circumstances is it kickstarts it. So I could say I need to write code to fix X problem. Okay, but you actually have to know how to evaluate whether what's kicked out is good or not. And so those are sort of the ways I see them. You see more structured problems, which is that first tier support. Semi-structured problems where you kind of know what you want with grammar, and then you have harder to answer questions which really need a lot of human supervision of the bot. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned that I find really interesting is kind of creating thousands of lines of base code that might take a team of coders a little bit to create, but they're able to create pretty quickly, which I think is really interesting. So, I like how you kind of said it changes where the value is put in terms of expertise. But also, again, there are such broad usage. David, can you tell me a little bit about kind of where or what kind of AI chatbots we're seeing in terms of the options available to the public?
Well, I mean, I think there's the thing that a lot of the attention is all around the generative ones. That's where you're seeing all the news, all the news items. And there's really the big one is OpenAI's ChatGPT. Google has DeepMind. I think that's what's backing it, and they're coming out with something called Bard. But essentially, they're the same thing. There's these things that generate text dynamically based on using a lot of text that's fed into them in the first place and making guesses about what the next word is going to be. And so I think what has captured everybody's imagination is not so much the being able to kind of like do some of the pattern matching and some of the stuff that's previously with AI that's been something which has been used a lot for, but where it can compose an essay for you or it can write code for you. I think that's really the kind that when we're talking about those, that's the main type. And then the types within those are basically just sort of almost like brands of similar products.
Sure. These generative programs that you spoke about, it seems like there's so many of them, but my question, I guess, is what really differentiates them? You were saying that really where they draw their base of knowledge from is what's fed into them. Is that really the only thing that distinguishes generator A and generator B, or is there something else in the way they're actually structured that changes between them?
So Konstantin might be able to talk a little more about like, the technical piece of it, but I mean, my understanding is that when you look at OpenAI versus DeepMind, it is the data set that's fed into it. So I think OpenAI uses pretty much the text on the web, where DeepMind uses a different data set. So they wind up looking a lot the same. And the basic mechanism with which how they work is very similar. And and then it comes down to the specifics of the models and the data set that they're fed.
Do you want to speak a little bit more to the technical side then?
I'd better speak about some features which also like implemented there. So besides ChatGPT and DeepMind that David mentioned, there are some other options like ChatSonic, UChat, Bing AI Chat, which also like based on ChatGPT, Google's Bard AI, Character AI, like lots of different them. So ChatGPT that we are mostly discussing these days is based on the historical database. ChatGPT 3 is on the text documents up to like 2021. So it doesn't know the recent things that happened. It's one of the limitations. And another thing that it cannot search online. So it's a predefined model. It's already trained. So it's just returns you the answer what it knows. If it doesn't know it, it can search it online. But there are some other options which can. So ask the question, they not only generate the text, they also search online, they find the relevant pages, they get the information from the pages, and then using this information, they generate their response using the actual facts. So it's already implemented in ChatSonic, and UChat also searches online and gets the facts from online.
Thank you. Yeah, so it seems like there are some real differences in between these different options. my question, I guess, going forward is, as the lifespan of these chat engines kind of goes on, are these differences going to become more or less significant as that data set that they're drawing from kind of expands? Is that going to become a real difference as these chatbots continue to be developed and they buffer out some of these issues, or?
So you're going to see three things happen. Okay. The first is you're going to see introduction of non-text data, and we're seeing that in GPT-4 and GPT-5. So we're able to take video, sound, image data, and we're able to weave that in with the text data to make predictions. So that's one big shift that's coming. Okay, the second big shift that's coming is we're going to see more customization of the chatbots.
Okay.
So Microsoft will have its own proprietary data set that informs X, Y, or Z. So say you want to do travel, and like you may not remember when Bing was like the best for travel. Okay, but Microsoft will take its travel data set, it'll apply its own algorithms, and it'll use generative AI to predict travel patterns in ways with proprietary data sets that say Google Flight doesn't have. So I think what we're going to see is very large carved out data sets that firms create value through using the bots by having unique data sets again, which have their own biases and problems, which we haven't talked about as much. And then the third piece we're going to see change a lot is the volume of data they can handle.
Okay.
Okay. So the difference between ChatGPT and 4 and 5 isn't just the kind of data, it's the amount of data and their ability to digest it in real time. Konstantin alluded to that when he said going out and be able to search and integrate real-time data into these bots, into the generative machine learning algorithms. We're not great at that yet. So what you're going to see is customization, new forms of data, and then possibly more evolution on the algorithm side itself in the next 3 or 4 years. And that's going to create more diversity. While we may see similarity in underpinning principles, I think we're going to see more diversity in applications.
Okay.
Because if you want to predict travel, right? You want travel relevant information.
Yeah.
You don't want all the information.
And one engine will become better, or they'll have better sources to be able to predict what is the best way to travel, right?
If you remember the old Netflix competition where who could come up with the best Netflix algorithm? I can envision seeing a race amongst bot manufacturers over who can come up with the most predictive bot, or the best generative bot.
Okay.
You know, and an arms race going on around that. And that's where Google and Microsoft and competitors are chasing right now.
One thing that really stood out to me is that the chatbots in themselves will kind of specialize in what they do, which I find really interesting. And one of the big topics in terms of higher ed and AI chatbots is how some of these chatbots can create and synthesize an entire paper, a college level essay, and every professor's freaking out that they're going to have 20 students submitting papers that nobody ever wrote. Are we seeing anything in the field around these kind of issues where somebody could use that? Is there any way that the chatbots are trying to break down and stop people from being able to synthesize a whole college paper or anything like that?
I mean, so I'm not sure that there's efforts to stop it, but there's tools like Zero GPT and OpenAI has their own classifier tool that tells you whether or not something was generated by generative AI or not. So there's ways to detect. I mean, there's plagiarism detectors like Turnitin. It's reasonable to assume that Zero GPT or something like it will be built into these tools that will also say, well, it wasn't necessarily plagiarized from the web, but AI created this.
This wasn't by a human.
On the other hand, and maybe we'll talk about this either now or a little bit later, is I think there's an overreaction to this idea that somehow, of the importance of being able to generate like an essay using AI, using generative AI. I think there's, it's a similar kind of overreaction to many other sort of technological advances and how they were going to impact, students in the classroom.
Yeah.
So I think that long term, these tools are going to become part of the arsenal of things that students have that help them do better work, and will get better at being able to give students instructions and guidance and what we value as far as what they generate themselves and what they have tools help them generate.
That's always the big debate when something new in technology. Is it overhyped? Is it underhyped? And whatnot. But I think one of the interesting things you mentioned, though, is that it could become a tool. And I'm kind of wondering, how do you guys see generative or non-generative, other forms of AI chatbots becoming a tool in the classroom, and how can professors really kind of approach that if they want to?
I prepared like a long list of positive things that ChatGPT will bring to our life.
Sure.
Everyone is talking about the cheating, but I consider ChatGPT as a really good tool for students, and we need to find the right way to implement it in our classroom and to help students to like get better with that. So things that students can do with that is to check, ask questions and get the answers. So like previously, my students, if they have some issues, they go to Google and they search for, let's say, an error in the code, and they get answer from Stack Overflow. Now they can ask different types of questions and get the answer from ChatGPT. ChatGPT can generate summaries. If you have a long text and you just need to get the essence of the text, ChatGPT can easily do that for you. It can provide like different explanations and examples for complex concepts that we explain in the classroom. So if students do not understand how we explain it, maybe ChatGPT can find some different words to explain the same thing from a different perspective on a different level. It can provide feedback. So I think David already mentioned that if you can you work on something, you can submit, and ChatGPT will give you feedback like before submitting it to instructor. Then ChatGPT can give you practice questions. So you're preparing for an exam in data analytics class, and you ask like, ChatGPT, please generate me 10 questions on data analytics. It will give you questions.
Okay.
You will make an attempt to answer them, ask what was the correct answer, and that's how you will practice in preparation for the exam. So it would be like a personalized tutor for the student.
Interesting. Now that's the first I've ever heard of something like it could create basically a mock test or mock questions at least. That seems excellent. A really fast way for students to get authentic and diversified questions. You're not taking the same questions that have been asked every year. That seems really beneficial to students. Do you see that being used in that way, or is that just kind of like maybe in the future that's how it could be used?
So I really hope that it will be used like in the nearest future.
Okay.
So we will already have this tool, and it's developing,
Okay.
and it's already on a certain level of quality. Why not to use in our classrooms?
Sure.
So this is the first semester when we have ChatGPT, and we're kind of exploring. I already introduced ChatGPT to my students. I allowed them to use it, and I'm like exploring how they can use. But maybe we will like change our policies during the summer and kind of force them to use in the fall semester. We'll discuss it later.
Yeah, David, it seems like you have something you want to add.
I think that as far as, I agree with Konstantin, that I think that these tools are immediately usable. And I think that, well, will it be practical to have it generate sample questions or something like that? I think it's the same issue for instructors that it is for students, which is that you also have to be a savvy information consumer.
Sure.
So if I generate a question for an exam using ChatGPT, I wouldn't just copy paste it into an exam and go. I would verify it against what I know. I would make sure that the question makes sense. And that's a good skill, or it's a really important skill for students to have, is that if they get an answer from ChatGPT, they should be able to they shouldn't be just taking it at its word. They should be triangulating that against what they know. The same way that if they Google something or they go to Stack Overflow for something, they shouldn't take that at face value. So it's another kind of reinforcement of this idea that maybe what we should be teaching more is how to interpret and evaluate information sources, and worry less about whether or not it's regurgitating a fact that we could just memorize anyway.
Yeah, and now that people have settled down, like when ChatGPT first came out, it was like, this was the end. I can't tell you how many people said, oh, this changes everything, all my case studies are ruined. And we're starting to see faculty adapt. And what they're doing is they're starting to say, okay, we've taught you the principles. Here's a passage, and it may be generated by ChatGPT. Identify the problems. Pick apart the output of the analysis, teaching the critical thinking David's alluding to, and pick apart the output from ChatGPT and demonstrate what you really know. And that kind of critical thinking, ChatGPT and tools like it don't do very well right now. So we're seeing it used in that way. The other way we're starting to see it used more is actually as an aid for writing and an aid for critical thinking. So you put in your statement and you go, okay, what's wrong with it? And it'll show you, or it'll point out flaws in your logic. Well, that's an iterative discourse between you and the technology that I can see in less than 5 years. Any one of us sitting at our desk, working on a project, we have our personal GPT type app that's been trained up to our preferences and our understanding, and we have a conversation with an algorithm that makes us better. And I really think that's what I'm hopeful that we can start thinking about in terms of pedagogy, is teaching kids how to use these tools to make themselves better. Because what we know from all the work that I've done on AI and all the work I've read about AI is when humans and AI work together, we get the best products. It's not in isolation. And I think that's the next wave. Like, that's really what I think we all want to get to. That's what you're doing in your class.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what you've described.
I mean, even for generating code, which, I'm not sure I even care if a student can use it to generate code, because they would have to be so specific in their instructions, at least at this point, to get exactly the code they want without modifying it.
Yeah.
That they might as well know how to solve the problem. And if the code they generate needs to be modified, they still have to know how to modify it.
Okay.
So one way or another, they have to have the higher knowledge and remembering very simple things about like what format the code should be in.
Yeah.
Do we really care if they know that off the top of their head, or if they just get an aid to help them?
Well, speaking about the pedagogy side, it sounds like as long as they're still be able to apply it, really, right? And they're still able to practice it, that's what's still really important for you all. And I think that's great to hear. And I want to talk, you guys all said you kind of implemented it in some way in your class, and you're probably some of the first professors, at least at Temple, to do that. And I kind of want to end on just, do you have any takeaways, any mistakes that maybe you made, maybe a way you want to introduce it, maybe you have another preliminary skill kind of go along with it? You were saying tech savvy, or just kind of tech awareness, being on the internet, not trusting everything. And
we're still kind of halfway through the semester, so I'm still trying to figure out how it's going. But what I'm seeing, sort of anecdotally, is that is kind of going back to my code example, is that students tend to take the answer at face value. And so I've seen them take like a block of code and then copy paste it into their and try to execute it, and it doesn't work. And so, and they're not sure why. If this told them how to do something, why doesn't it work? Well, it's because it's not always right, and because it doesn't fit every situation what it's generating. It's giving you almost like a sort of like a first pass at something. And I think that lesson can also carry through to other types of assignments where they have to write a paragraph of something, which is that the thing that the generative AI creates is just a first pass. And so, what I did in the beginning of my classes, I just basically said, here's the caveats. It makes things up sometimes. It doesn't attribute sources very well yet. And so you have to double check everything. But I didn't give them any other guidelines because I wanted to see what they'd come up with. But now I think this whole, like, maybe integrating some of this, here's how you can interpret what you see from any source on the web, including this, that kind of like opening set of guidelines might help them use the tool more effectively.
Sure. So maybe it might be a little too early then to ask you guys, what's your big takeaway from teaching with it in class? But I will be interested to kind of follow up with you guys at least at the end of the semester, or even in another semester after you've had a little bit more time to continue to implement it. You've continued to practice this in a classroom environment and see what it is. Really sounds like you're really open-ended with it in the way that they get to use it. And I think that's really great because it allows students to kind of explore the way that they want to use it.
Yep, I think it's too early to make any conclusions. Yeah, so this semester is the first one with ChatGPT present and widely available.
Okay,
so we'll see a little bit later.
So I used mine in an executive MBA course with 9 experienced executives, and ChatGPT had just burst onto the scene. So we reframed the course and did our case study around it. Had 3 different teams build out 3 different set of prescriptions for how to deploy it at work.
Okay.
And my takeaway from that experience was really interesting. The first was each group came up with something totally different. One came up with a structured use guide, one came up with why it wasn't ready yet for deployment in industry, and the third said, here's how we can use it to make hiring better. So I was surprised by the diversity, which is I think what you're going to find at the end of the semester, and you're probably finding right now, is they're finding really wicked interesting ways to use it. So that was the first piece, is we don't know what to expect from the students. The second piece is that we can't substitute for actually using it. Like, a lot of people are talking about ChatGPT and generative machine learning, but a lot of the people talking about it and complaining about it haven't used it in their classroom yet. So I'd encourage all the faculty that listen to this to actually use it and do more than read your local blog that says this is evil. Actually take some time to use it and talk to people in the real world about how to use it. And then the third piece is I would tell them to stay tuned, because ChatGPT is so different than GPT-4 and GPT-5. It's actually fairly primitive, and the great leap forward has occurred in 3 months. Like, this space is moving really, really fast. So whatever we say today will not be relevant in August.
That's okay.
They're going to have to refresh it up.
Hopefully we'll still be here and we can maybe do another podcast and follow up and see how it went and see where really the future is. But I think it's a good time to wrap up this episode. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for sharing what you guys have learned and what you're kind of doing so far in the field. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.